when God's people opt for unbelief, that's never quite the whole story, is it? There's always something else in which we put our trust, in preference to trusting in God. In Ahab's case, see 1 Kings, beginning at chapter 16, verse 29. In Ahab's case, it was Baal. Baal, why? Baal because your wife is a committed Baal worshipper. Baal because everyone else around here is worshipping Baal. Baal because, well, he meant to be the god of rain, and we could do with some for the farmers. So Baal because Ahab's decided it's in the national interests to worship Baal. Okay, there are a few compromises that have to be made if you go down this route. Turns out, if you worship Baal, you bring in Asherah too. She's the fertility goddess. God's people are meant to be cutting down the Asherah poles, Deuteronomy 7:5, but you're going to have to reverse that policy and stick one up. And of course, being false gods, Baal and Asherah have false prophets to speak for them. Not a problem. False prophets can still put on quite a show, certainly good enough to convince the average man or woman in the street. Unless, that is, you still have a few good old-fashioned prophets of the real God speaking up at the same time. In which case you run the risk that people will be able to tell the difference. Jezebel, Ahab's wife, eventually sets to work wiping them out. So a few compromises. Deciding that Baal worship is the way to go involves recalibrating the national conscience in a downward direction. The first thing that Ahab discovers is that you can credit whoever you want with sending the rain. It won't make the slightest bit of difference to the reality. In 1 Kings 17 verse 1 we hear one of those pesky prophets, Elijah, delivering a message from God. As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my command. Now, when the drought does indeed take hold, Ahab has a God-given opportunity, doesn't he? It shouldn't take much joining of the dots to work out that if you've gone out of your way to serve the rain god, Baal, and instead of rain you've got drought, maybe, just maybe, it isn't Baal who sends the rain at all. Or you can just double down on the Baal worship and make anyone who speaks for Israel's God public enemy number one. Now then, class, from our personal experience of rebelling against God, is there any doubt whatsoever which way Ahab will jump? Is it even close? Of course not. He doubles down on the Baal worship, and Elijah in consequence becomes an early example of the prophet who has no honour amongst his own people. First he is in hiding in the Kerith ravine and fed by ravens, and then he's off to visit a widow at Zarephath. In both cases God has commanded for his provision. Baal, of course, can't command or lift a finger to provide for his new cohorts of Israelite worshippers. Another message for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. Behold the impotence of your false God against the complete authority of Israel's God. Another message ignored. There is a bit of import-export going on here. Jezebel comes to Israel from Sidon, bringing Baal worship. Elijah goes exactly the other way. Zarephath is in Sidon, bringing to at least one woman and her son the blessings of trusting in God. Remember the promise to Abraham from Genesis 12? You will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. All nations on earth will be blessed through you. What's going on with Elijah epitomizes how Israel was always meant to be relating to the nations around. What Ahab and Jezebel are doing reverses the process, importing sin instead of exporting holiness. Of course, it isn't just Elijah who suffers under Ahab. We learn in chapter 18 about Obadiah, a devout believer in the Lord, who is also in charge of Ahab's palace. He has, many of us do have, seriously divided loyalties. At first, he can resolve those loyalties in secret, sheltering and feeding 100 of the Lord's prophets. But sooner or later, he must show his hand to his master. Faithfulness in a time of rebellion. It involves us in great risk and great cost. And it all leads up to the famous scene on Mount Carmel, where the whole nation's representatives get to compare the power of the living God with the non-existent power of Baal. Stop worshipping the rain god and oh, suddenly it's pouring. Lesson learnt for Ahab? Well, what do you think?